Something was scratching at the walls of the tent. Not from outside. From underneath the ground. That slow dragging of nails against fabric kept a woman named Clara awake for 6 straight hours in the middle of a forest she never should have entered. What happened to Clara is only one fragment of something larger, something that resists explanation and punishes curiosity. But I am not going to give you a collection of campfire tales tonight. Instead, I want to trace a single thread. A series of events connected by geography, by timing, and by a detail so specific it cannot be coincidence. These events span roughly 18 months. They involve 5 people who never met each other. And they all center on the same stretch of mountain forest in a region I have been asked not to name. Clara was the first. She arrived at the trailhead on a Thursday afternoon in March, signed the register at the kiosk, and hiked 4 miles to a dispersed camping area beside a shallow creek. She had done this kind of trip before. Solo. Minimal gear. 2 nights in the backcountry to clear her head. Routine. The first night passed without incident. The second night did not. Around 2 in the morning, Clara woke to the sound I described. That scratching beneath her tent floor. She lay still, convinced it was a burrowing animal, maybe a marmot or a ground squirrel working on a tunnel. But the sound traveled. It moved from the foot of the tent to the head, then back again, slowly, deliberately, like fingers dragging across the underside of the fabric. She pressed her palm flat against the tent floor. She could feel it. Pressure. Something pushing up from below, tracing a line beneath her hand. Clara did not sleep again. At dawn, she packed everything and moved the tent. Underneath where it had been, the ground looked undisturbed. No burrow. No tunnel entrance. No tracks. But the soil was warm. Noticeably warm, like something underneath had been generating heat all night long. She left that morning. Drove home. Told no one for weeks. When she finally mentioned it to a coworker who organized hiking groups, the coworker went pale and asked Clara to describe the exact location. Clara did. The coworker pulled out her phone, scrolled through old messages, and showed Clara a text from 7 months earlier. A man named Tomas had camped in that identical spot and reported the same thing. Warm ground. Something moving beneath the surface. Tomas never posted about it online. Never filed a report. He simply stopped hiking. Now let me tell you what separates this from a ghost story, from an urban legend passed between weekend campers. 5 months after Clara's experience, a geological survey team was contracted to assess soil stability along a new section of trail being proposed through that same area. The team leader, a woman named Renata, had 30 years of experience in subsurface analysis. She had mapped fault lines, assessed landslide risk, catalogued underground water systems across 3 continents. Nothing about this project should have surprised her. The team drilled test bores at intervals along the proposed route. Standard procedure. Most of the cores came back normal. Decomposed granite, root systems, clay deposits. Unremarkable. Except for bore number 14. Bore 14 was drilled approximately 200 meters from where Clara had camped. The core sample from a depth of about 3 meters contained something that Renata initially assumed was a contamination error. Woven between layers of andite clay were thin filaments of an organic material the field lab could not immediately identify. Not root fibers. Not fungal networks. The filaments were arranged in a pattern that Renata described in her field notes as disturbingly regular. Parallel lines. Evenly spaced. Like threads in fabric. The sample was sent to a university lab for analysis. I have not been able to confirm what the results showed because Renata told me the project was quietly shelved 3 weeks later. The proposed trail was rerouted. No official explanation was provided. Renata retired the following spring. When I asked her why, she said something I still think about. She said the ground there is not empty. She said it in the same tone you would use to tell someone their house has a gas leak. Matter of fact. Urgent. Final. 2 months after the survey was cancelled, a man named Diego made a decision that still keeps him awake. Diego was not a hiker. He was a photographer specializing in forest canopy images taken with drones. He had secured a permit to fly over the restricted zone adjacent to the area where Clara camped, where Renata drilled her bore samples. The permit was narrow in scope. Fly the drone. Capture overhead images of tree density. Submit the data for a conservation report. Diego launched the drone around mid-morning on a clear day. Good visibility. Low wind. He flew a standard grid pattern at roughly 90 meters above the canopy. The images were sharp. Dense old growth. Thick undergrowth. Streams cutting silver lines through green. On the fourth pass, the drone's thermal camera flagged an anomaly. Beneath the canopy, in an area with no trails and no recorded human activity, the thermal sensor detected a heat signature. Not a campfire. Not an animal. The signature was linear. A straight line of heat running roughly 40 meters through the forest floor, like a buried pipe carrying hot water. Except there were no pipes. No infrastructure. No roads within miles. Diego adjusted the flight path and made 3 more passes over the anomaly. Each time, the thermal reading was consistent. A clean, straight line of warmth beneath the ground, cutting through the forest at a depth the drone's sensors estimated to be between 2 and 4 meters. The same depth as Renata's bore sample. Diego downloaded the thermal data and overlaid it on a topographic map. The heat line ran directly through the coordinates where Clara had camped. Where Tomás had camped before her. It continued northeast for what appeared to be several hundred more meters before the drone's range forced Diego to turn back. He submitted the data with his conservation report. A month later, he received an email thanking him for his work and informing him that the thermal images had been excluded from the final publication due to what was described as sensor calibration inconsistencies. Diego checked his equipment. The calibration was fine. He had the maintenance logs to prove it. He filed a follow-up inquiry. Never received a response. Here is where the thread pulls tightest. A woman named Ines was the last person I spoke with about this area. She was not a hiker, a scientist, or a photographer. She was a librarian in the nearest town, about 40 kilometers from the trailhead. And she had been quietly collecting accounts for years. Not publishing them. Not broadcasting them. Just collecting. Ines kept a notebook. Handwritten entries spanning more than a decade. Dates. Locations. Names when she could get them. Descriptions of what people experienced. And she had noticed something that no one else had because no one else was looking at the full picture. Every account she collected, every strange experience reported from that stretch of forest, occurred between March and October. Never in winter. The phenomena, whatever it was, appeared to follow a seasonal cycle. Active during warm months. Dormant during cold. Like something alive. Ines showed me one entry that I cannot stop thinking about. It was from a couple who had hiked through the area 8 years ago. They described stopping to rest on a fallen log and feeling a vibration coming up through the wood. Faint but rhythmic. They assumed it was a distant logging operation or heavy machinery. But the vibration had a cadence that the woman, a retired nurse, recognized immediately. A pulse. 60 to 70 beats per minute. Steady. Coming from the ground beneath the log. They left. They never returned. And they asked Ines not to use their real names. I called Renata one more time before putting this together. I asked her directly what she thought was beneath that forest. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that I want you to hear exactly as she said it. She said, "I have spent my career studying what the earth is made of. Rock, mineral, water, organic matter, all of it following rules we understand. What I pulled out of that bore did not follow any rule I know. And the fact that the project was cancelled without explanation tells me that someone above me looked at those results and decided the public was better off not knowing. I asked her if she was afraid. She said no. She said she was careful. And that there is a difference. I have turned this over in my mind for months. The warm ground beneath Clara's tent. The patterned filaments in Renata's core sample. The thermal line Diego captured from 90 meters above. The seasonal cycliness documented across a decade of quiet record-keeping. The pulse that a retired nurse felt through a fallen log. None of these people were looking for a mystery. None of them wanted to find anything. They stumbled into the edges of something that exists beneath a forest most people drive past without a second thought. Something old. Something patient. Something that breathes in the warm months and sleeps through the cold. We talk about what lives in the forest as though the threat stands between the trees. We imagine predators. Strangers. Weather. Exposure. We imagine danger at eye level, on the surface, in the spaces we can see. Nobody thinks to look down. And whatever is down there, pressed against the underside of the earth we walk on, it felt Clara's hand when she pushed against that tent floor. It pushed back. It knew she was there. The question that haunts me is simpler and worse than any mystery. Did it let her leave? Or did it just decide she was not what it was waiting for?